September 17, 1957, Brooklyn. Joseph Bonanno opened a small, ice-cold package. Inside, 10 human fingers. 3 days earlier, his family demanded 50% of Bumpy Johnson's empire. This wasn't revenge or rage. It was a calculated boundary, drawn without firing a gun. One man challenged a national syndicate and survived. So how did Bumpy Johnson end a war before it began? To understand that decision, the story has to return to where it all started. The package arrived without ceremony. No return address. No warning. A small wooden crate on Joseph Bonanno's desk is like a landmine. The office was quiet. Windows shut against the September heat. Brooklyn traffic hummed below. Banano stood alone. He had sent everyone out. Get out, all of you. Now. The wood was cold, beaded with moisture from melting ice inside. He could smell it before he lifted the lid. Metal and rust and something that used to be alive. He opened it slowly. Inside were 10 human fingers, severed clean at the second knuckle, preserved in crushed ice, turning pink as it melted. The gold wedding band on the ring finger was unmistakable. Frank Scalise wore it every day for 12 years. There was a note, typed. 4 words. Your offer is declined. Bonanno's jaw tightened. His fingers gripped the desk until the knuckles went white. He stared at those 10 pieces of Scalise without blinking, and then he laughed. Not amusement. The sound a man makes when he realizes he has been challenged in a way that cannot be ignored. Carmine, he called out, his voice flat and cold as January concrete. Get back in here. The door opened. His underboss stepped inside, took one look at the box and stopped breathing. Madonna Santa. Is that Frankie? That was Frankie, Banano corrected. Now he is a cripple and a message. Someone just told me to go to hell, and they used my own captain to deliver it. Who would do this? Who has the balls to do this to us? The man I sent Frankie to negotiate with. The man who runs Harlem. The one they call Bumpy. Bonanno's voice dropped lower. I offered him a partnership. 50% of his operation in exchange for our protection. Frankie walked in there 3 days ago with papers and numbers and a smile on his face. Now look at him. In this world, you could put a bullet in a rival's skull. You could firebomb his restaurant until the walls ran black with smoke and cooked flesh. But you did not send pieces of a boss's captain like a telegram. That was something else. We go to war, Carmine said. Tonight. We burn Harlem to the ground. We kill everyone who ever shook hands with this Bumpy bastard. Banano held up one hand. Wait. Boss, they cut off Frankie's fingers, all 10. They sawed through bone and tendon and nerve until he had nothing but stumps. Then send the pieces to you like you are some civilian. We cannot let this stand. I said wait. Banano picked up one of the fingers, held it to the light. The nail was clean. The cut professional. This was not rage. This was surgery. A man making a point. What point? That he is insane? That he will not bend? That he would rather cripple my negotiator than give me $1? That is a dangerous man. A man who has thought this through. His name was Ellsworth Raymond Johnson. Bumpy. He controlled everything north of 110th Street. Numbers. Protection. Policy. Built it without permission. Kept it through discipline and a willingness to do what made other criminals nervous. Bumpy did not raise his voice. He made decisions that no one questioned twice. 3 days earlier, Frank Scalise walked into Small's paradise. Duke Ellington on the jukebox, cigar smoke and Italian wine. He sat down across from Bumpy and opened his briefcase. Mr. Johnson, Scalise began, spreading papers. I came with an opportunity from Mr. Bonanno. Bumpy did not touch the papers. One hand on his bourbon. face all sharp angles and old scars, eyes like wet stone. He let Scalise talk for 5 minutes. Here is how it works. You give us 50%. Numbers, policy, protection, loans. We make sure the cops stay bought, no other families move in. You live long enough to enjoy your money. Illinois Gordon sat behind Bumpy at the bar, enforcer and friend. He sipped his drink and watched. Bumpy finally spoke. Quiet. Calm. The calm before hurricanes. Let me understand this. You want half of everything I built, everything I bled for, and in exchange, you promise not to kill me. Is that right? Scalise smiled. We prefer to call it a partnership. I prefer to call it extortion. The smile faded. Mr. Johnson, I do not think you understand how this works. The Bonanno family is offering you protection. You should be grateful. Grateful. Bumpy rolled the word like spoiled meat. You want me to be grateful that you are robbing me at gunpoint. Scalise leaned forward. The false friendliness dropped. Listen carefully. I came here as a courtesy. I could have sent men to take what we want. But Mr. Bonanno believes in doing things the civilized way first. Give us our 50%. Sign the papers. Everyone stays happy. And if I say no, then you will not be happy much longer. Bumpy looked at Illinois. Illinois looked back. Something passed between them that Scalise did not see. Bumpy turned back to Scalise and said, Tell your boss I said no. You are making a mistake. I have made it worse. Scalise stood up. He gathered his papers with sharp movements. You have 3 days to reconsider. After that, things get unpleasant. They are already unpleasant, Bumpy said. You just do not know it yet. Scalise left, thinking he had delivered a message to a dead man. He was wrong. He was the message. Standing in his office with 10 fingers melting in a box, Banano understood. Bumpy had not killed Scalise because killing starts wars. Instead, he crippled him. Turned Banano's negotiator into a permanent reminder of what happens when you try to extort Bumpy Johnson. So what do we do? Carmine asked. We think. We plan. But we cannot rush into war with a man who thinks like this. A man who cuts off 10 fingers instead of pulling 1 trigger understands consequences. Banano closed the lid. The smell lingered. We think. We plan. And then we end him so completely that no one ever dares to send me a box like this again. But Bumpy Johnson had already won. The moment he chose mutilation over elimination, he had set everything in motion. In this world, some messages are communicated through silence and pain and precision that leaves no room for misunderstanding. Bumpy had sent one of those messages, and now everyone from Brooklyn to the Bronx would have to decide what it meant for them. Small's paradise sat on 135th Street like a jewel in a broken crown. Outside was crumbling tenements and broken streetlights, but inside you could almost forget Harlem was a battleground. Almost. Duke Ellington poured from the speakers, Cuban cigar smoke mixed with expensive Italian wine. Every deal made here was built on the understanding that violence was always one wrong word away. The afternoon crowd was thin. A few regulars at the bar, 2 women in the corner booth. And in the back, at the table nobody else was allowed to touch, sat Bumpy Johnson with a glass of bourbon he had not lifted in an hour. Frank Scalise walked through the door at 2:47. You could tell everything about a man by watching how he entered a room that did not belong to him. Scalise walked like he owned the place. Gray suit, Italian leather shoes, expensive briefcase. Behind him, 2 of Banano's soldiers leaned against the wall, jackets loose to hide the bulges under their arms. Illinois Gordon sat at the bar nursing a whiskey that had been the same level for 45 minutes. Bumpy's right hand, his enforcer, his friend. Illinois tracked every movement in the mirror behind the bottles. His hand rested on the bar top, relaxed, ready. Scales reached the table and sat without asking permission, a calculated insult. He set the briefcase down with a soft thud. The latches clicked open. Inside were papers, contracts, spreadsheets showing numbers that represented lives and territory, and money that made men kill their own brothers. He spread the documents across the table like a developer showing properties to a mark who did not understand he was being robbed. "Mr. Johnson," Scales began, his voice carrying that quality white men from Brooklyn had when they walked into Harlem, thinking their skin color made them untouchable. "I am here on behalf of Mr. Joseph Bonanno, who sends his regards and respect for what you have accomplished." Bumpy did not touch the papers. He sat with hands folded, fingers interlaced like a man praying or deciding whether someone deserved to live. His face showed nothing. Anyone who knew Bumpy Johnson understood this was when he was most dangerous. "Mr. Banano believes there is tremendous opportunity here. What you have built is impressive, but you are operating without protection, without the connections that keep the police cooperative and competition at bay." He paused, waiting for Bumpy to ask. Bumpy did not ask. He just sat there, eyes fixed on Scales with the intensity of a man watching a rat in a trap. "What we are proposing is a partnership. You continue to run your operations. We provide protection. We make sure the right people get paid off. No other families expand into your territory. You live long enough to enjoy what you have earned." "In exchange for what?" 50%. Scales said it like discussing the weather. 50% of all revenue streams, the numbers, the policy, the protection rackets, the loans. In return, you receive the full backing of the Banano family, our connections, our influence, our muscle. The silence lasted maybe 10 seconds. Felt like 10 years. Illinois at the bar stopped drinking. The two women stopped laughing. Even the music seemed quieter. Bumpy had not moved, but something had shifted in his eyes, something cold and final, like a door closing on a vault. "Let me make sure I understand," Bumpy said, each word precise. "You want me to give you half of my business, half of everything I built without asking your permission, without needing your help. And in exchange for this 50%, you promise not to kill me, not to burn my establishments, not to send your men into my territory. Is that accurate?" Scales's smile had edges like broken glass. We prefer to think of it as insurance. The world is dangerous. Men in your position have accidents. Buildings catch fire, cars explode, people disappear. With the Banano family behind you, none of those unfortunate accidents will happen. And if I say no, the smile got wider. Scales leaned back. Then you will discover exactly how dangerous the world can be when you try to stand alone. Mr. Bonanno is being generous. He does not have to be. He could send men to take what he wants. He could burn Harlem to ashes and build something new on top of it. But he believes in doing business the civilized way. He is giving you a choice. Make the smart choice. Bumpy looked past Scales to where Illinois sat at the bar. Their eyes met in the mirror. No words passed, but an entire conversation happened in that glance. Illinois' hand shifted slightly. Ready. Waiting. Bumpy turned back to Scales, and when he spoke, his voice could have frozen the Hudson in July. "Tell your boss I said no." The smile died like a candle blown out. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Tell Joseph Bonanno that Bumpy Johnson said no. Tell him Harlem is not for sale. Tell him I built this territory without his blessing, and I will keep it without his permission. Tell him exactly that. Do not change a word." Scales's hands tightened on the table. "You are making a serious mistake, a mistake you will regret. The Banano family does not accept rejection. We do not take no for an answer. Then this will be a new experience for all of you." Bumpy stood up slowly, deliberately. "You have 3 days to leave Harlem. 72 hours. If I see you or any of Bonanno's people north of 110th Street after that, you will wish you had stayed in Brooklyn." Scalise gathered his papers with shaking hands. You do not understand who you are dealing with. The Bonanno family has connections that go all the way to the top. We have judges, senators, police captains. We can make your life very difficult. Bumpy walked past him toward the door, and as he passed, he said quietly, almost gently, "Then they are about to learn something new about Harlem. Close the door on your way out." The afternoon light hit Bumpy's face as he stepped outside. For just a moment, you could see the calculation behind his eyes, the wheels turning, the decisions being made that would change everything. Behind him, Scalise was packing up his briefcase with angry movements, his face red with humiliation and rage. When a demand dresses itself as an offer, when extortion wears the clothes of partnership, when powerful men speak of protection but mean submission, there is only one response. You either bend your knee and spend the rest of your life paying tribute, or you stand straight and accept that war is coming. Bumpy Johnson had just made his choice, and Frank Scalise, walking out of Small's paradise with his unsigned contracts and wounded pride, had no idea he was not leaving as a messenger. He was leaving the message. The door closed behind Scalise at 3:15. By 3:20, every man who mattered in Harlem knew war was no longer a possibility. It was a certainty. Bumpy Johnson sat in the back office, door locked, curtains drawn. The room was dark except for one yellow lamp throwing shadows like ghosts of men who had made the wrong decisions. Illinois Gordon stood by the window. 3 of Bumpy's most trusted men sat at the small table. Strategists, not soldiers. Men who understood that survival was measured in the quality of your thinking. On the table sat a bottle of Barolo, 15 years old. The cork had been pulled an hour ago. The wine poured into a glass in front of Bumpy, untouched. When Bumpy drank, he was thinking about pleasure. When he did not drink, he was thinking about survival. "They think we will bend," Bumpy said, his voice so quiet the men had to lean forward. "Bonanno and his people. They think that because we are black and they are white, because they have the judges and senators on their payroll, we will give them half of everything we built." Illinois turned from the window. "Are they wrong? About fear?" Bumpy picked up the glass, held it to the light. "Fear works on most men, but they made a mistake. They assumed that because I am afraid, I will do what they want. They do not understand that fear and obedience are 2 different things." He set the glass down without drinking. 50% is not a business proposition. It is an insult. Power is not given. It is taken, and it is kept by men who understand that sometimes you have to make an example so terrible that nobody ever tests you again. Raymond, a scarred veteran, cleared his throat. "So we go to war. Hit them hard and fast." "No. Flat and final. That is exactly what they want. Bonanno has soldiers, connections, the commission. If we start a shooting war, we will lose, not because we are not strong enough, but because they have resources we cannot match. They can replace 10 dead men with 20 new ones. We cannot." Raymond looked confused. "Then what do we do? Once you start paying tribute, you never stop." "I know." Bumpy stood, walked to the window. "We do not accept. We do not fight. We sent a message, but the message has to be so clear, so brutal, so permanent that nobody misunderstands it." Illinois was smiling now, not happy, the smile of a man who understood. "You are going to make an example of Scalise. Not just an example, a statement. Living proof that there are consequences for disrespect." Bumpy turned back. "Bonanno sent his captain to my territory to demand tribute. That captain threatened me. He did it because Banano believes his whiteness makes him untouchable." He walked back, picked up the glass, and this time drank. One long swallow that emptied half. "We are going to teach him that he was wrong, but we have to be smart. If we kill Scalise, Bonanno has to retaliate. The commission will demand it. So we do not kill him. Raymond frowned. Then what? We take something he can never get back. Something visible. Something that will follow him for the rest of his life. Every time anyone in the 5 families sees him, they will remember what happens when you disrespect Bumpy Johnson. Illinois spoke. His hands. His fingers. Bumpy corrected. All 10. Cut clean. Professionally. We do not torture him, but we take his fingers and send them to Banano with a simple message. Your offer is declined. This is what happens to men who come into my territory and threaten me. Marcus, a younger soldier, looked sick. That is brutal. That starts wars. No, Bumpy said patiently. Killing him starts a war. Taking his fingers ends one before it begins. Think about it. Banano cannot retaliate without looking weak. If he goes to the commission and says we mutilated his captain but left him alive, what does that make him? A man who got slapped and came crying to the teacher. But if we kill Scalise, Bonanno is obligated to hit back. By leaving Scalise alive but ruined, we put Bonanno in an impossible position. He cannot retaliate without looking petty. He cannot do nothing without looking weak. Either way, he loses face, and he learns that Harlem is not for sale. Illinois was nodding. When? Within 48 hours, we watch Scalise, learn his patterns, where he goes, when he is vulnerable. Then we take him somewhere quiet and do what needs to be done, clean. Surgical. We send him back to Brooklyn missing the tools of his trade, a negotiator who cannot shake hands, a man who cannot hold a gun or sign a contract or button his own shirt. That is the message. Raymond still looked uncertain. What if the commission decides this is too much? Then we deal with that when it comes, Bumpy said, but I do not think it will. The commission understands respect. They understand that a man has to defend his territory or he has no territory at all. What we are doing is not starting a war. We are drawing a line. We are saying this far and no farther. If they are smart, they will recognize that line and respect it, because the alternative is a war that nobody wins. He raised the glass like a toast, to clear communication, to messages that cannot be misunderstood, to the kind of respect that is earned with pain and remembered forever. The men around the table raised their drinks. Nobody smiled. This was not a victory. This was just the opening move in a game that would determine whether Harlem remained independent. But it was the right move. The only move. Because in this world, when someone comes to take what is yours, you have 2 choices. You can give it to them and hope they leave you something to live on, or you can make them regret ever asking. Bumpy Johnson had just chosen the second option, and Frank Scalise, drinking in a Brooklyn bar, had no idea he had already stopped being a man and become a message instead. Frank Scalise was a creature of habit. Most men in this business understood that patterns were dangerous, that routine was the enemy of survival. But Scalise had gotten comfortable. 15 years working for the Bonanno family without anyone raising a hand against him had made him sloppy. Every morning at 7:30, Scalise left his apartment on Hicks Street. He would walk 3 blocks to Marino's coffee shop, sit at the same table by the window, read the daily news while drinking 2 cups of black coffee. At 8:45, he would drive to a social club on Mulberry Street where Banano conducted business. But every Tuesday and Thursday, without fail, he would drive to an apartment building on Baltic Street where a woman named Rita Costello lived on the 3rd floor. Rita was married to a longshoreman who worked the night shift. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, Frank Scalise would spend exactly 2 hours in that apartment. Illinois spent 36 hours watching Scalise move through Brooklyn like a man who believed he was untouchable. He noted that Scalise carried a snub-nosed revolver in a shoulder holster, but he also noted that Scalise never looked behind him, never checked his mirrors, never varied his routine. On the afternoon of September 16th, Illinois sat in a car half a block from Rita Costello's apartment and watched Scalise park his Cadillac and walk inside with a bottle of wine. Illinois waited 5 minutes, then drove to where Bumpy Johnson sat in the back seat of a black Chrysler with Raymond and Marcus. "He is inside," Illinois said. "He will be there for 2 hours. The street is quiet. This is Brooklyn. Everyone minds their own business." Bumpy looked out at the rain that had started falling, light but steady. "How do we do this without noise?" "Chloroform," Raymond said, holding up a small bottle and a cloth. "He comes out. We are waiting by his car. I get behind him, put the cloth over his face. He breathes 3 or 4 times and he is out. Takes maybe 15 seconds. Marcus has the trunk open. We put him inside. Drive away." The rain kept falling. The street stayed empty. At 7:23, the door opened and Frank Scalise stepped out, collar turned up against the rain, moving quickly toward his car. He did not look left or right. He did not see Raymond step out from between 2 parked cars until Raymond was already behind him, with the cloth pressed against his face. Scalise tried to struggle. His hands came up, trying to pull Raymond's arms away, but Marcus was there, grabbing Scalise's wrists while Raymond kept the cloth pressed tight. Scalise tried to scream, but the sound came out muffled, and then it stopped as his body went limp. They caught him before he hit the ground. To anyone watching, it would have looked like 2 friends helping a drunk man. They put him in the trunk. The whole thing took less than 30 seconds. Illinois drove. Bumpy sat in the back seat, looking out at Brooklyn passing by, at the territory that belonged to families who believed their whiteness made them lords of creation. The rain kept falling. They drove to Queens, to an industrial area near the waterfront where warehouses sat empty during the night. The warehouse Illinois had chosen was owned by a textile company that asked no questions about who used their loading dock after hours. Inside, the space was dark except for a single work light hanging from a chain, throwing harsh shadows across concrete floors. They dragged Scalise out and carried him inside. There was a chair in the middle of the room, heavy wood with metal brackets welded to the arms and legs. They strapped him into it, leather restraints around his wrists and ankles, pulled tight. On a table 3 feet away sat a medical kit. Inside were surgical tools, sterile blades, hemostatic clamps, bandages, and antiseptic. Bumpy stood 10 feet away, watching Raymond check the restraints. Marcus was pale, his hands shaking. Illinois stood by the door, watching the street through a crack in the boards. Scalise started to wake up around 7:45. His eyes opened slowly, blinking against the harsh light. For a few seconds, he looked confused. Then he tried to move his hands and felt the restraints. "What the hell is this?" His voice came out rough, slurred. "Do you know who I am? Do you have any idea what you just did?" Bumpy walked forward until he was standing directly in front of Scalise. "I know exactly who you are, Frank. You are the man Joseph Bonanno sent to my club to demand 50% of everything I built. You are the man who threatened me with accidents and fires. You believed that because you are white and Italian and connected, that I would bend my knee. You were wrong." Scalise was fully awake now, his eyes darting around the room, taking in the restraints, the medical kit, the men standing in shadows. His face went from angry to something that looked like real fear. "You are making a mistake. Mr. Bonanno will bury you for this. He will burn Harlem to the ground. You cannot touch me. I am protected." "You were protected," Bumpy corrected. Past tense. "Right now, you are alone in a warehouse in Queens. Nobody knows where you are. And by the time anyone realizes you are missing, the message will have already been sent." "What message?" Scalise's voice cracked. Bumpy nodded to Illinois, who walked to the table and picked up one of the surgical blades, holding it up so the light caught the edge. "We are going to take your fingers, Frank. All 10 of them. We are going to cut them off cleanly, professionally, pack them in ice, and send them to Mr. Bonanno with a note that says your offer is declined. And then we are going to let you live so that every day for the rest of your life, when you look at your hands, you will remember what happens when you come into Harlem and threaten Bumpy Johnson." The fear in Scalaz's eyes turned into panic. He pulled against the restraints hard enough that the chair legs scraped against the concrete. "No, no, wait, we can talk about this. We can negotiate. I can go back to Mr. Banano and tell him you want different terms, 30%, 20, whatever you want. We can work this out." "You are right," Bumpy said. "I do not have to do this, but I am going to do it anyway. Because there are moments in this life when a man has to make a choice about who he is going to be. You can be the man who accepts insults and pays tribute, or you can be the man who draws a line and defends it no matter what the cost. I am choosing the second option, and you are going to be the proof of that choice. Please," Scalaz said, and now there was no anger in his voice, just raw desperation. "Please do not do this. I have a family. I have children. How am I supposed to work? How am I supposed to live?" "You will figure it out," Bumpy said. "Or you will not. Either way, the message gets sent. Either way, Bonanno and everyone else in the 5 families learns that Harlem is not for sale." He turned to Illinois. "Do it clean. Do it fast. I do not want him to suffer more than necessary. This is not about revenge. This is about communication." Illinois nodded. He put on surgical gloves and picked up the blade again, testing the edge. Raymond moved to hold Scalaz's left hand flat against the arm of the chair. Marcus looked like he was going to be sick, but he held his position. Scalaz was screaming now, pulling against the restraints hard enough that the leather cut into his wrists, but the chair did not move, and his hands stayed exactly where Raymond held them. "This is the moment you need to understand. When fear stops being an abstract concept and becomes something physical, something you can taste and smell and feel crawling up your spine like ice water. This is the moment when you realize that all the power and connections and protection you thought you had were just stories you told yourself to feel safe. This is the moment when you understand that there are consequences for disrespect, and that those consequences do not care about your family or your future or the plans you made for tomorrow." Illinois brought the blade down, and Frank Scalaz learned what it meant to be a message instead of a man. The screaming had stopped. Not because Frank Scalaz had accepted what was about to happen, but because his throat had gone raw, and his body had finally understood that no amount of noise would change the outcome. He sat in that chair with his wrists already bleeding from where the leather restraints had cut into his skin, his face wet with sweat and tears, his breathing coming in short, desperate gasps. Bumpy Johnson stood 5 feet away, watching Scalaz with the same expression a doctor might wear while explaining a terminal diagnosis. There was no anger in his face, no hatred, no pleasure. Just cold clinical detachment that was somehow more terrifying than rage would have been. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, measured, the tone of a professor delivering a lecture. "I want you to listen very carefully, Frank. I want you to understand what is about to happen and why. This is not revenge. This is not about making you suffer for the sake of suffering. This is communication. This is me sending a message to Joseph Banano and to every other man in the 5 families who might be thinking about moving into Harlem. And unfortunately for you, you are going to get that message." Scalaz tried to speak, but all that came out was a hoarse whisper. "Please, please, I am begging you. Do not do this. I will tell Bonanno whatever you want. Just let me go. Please." "No," Bumpy said simply. "Because if I let you go, then tomorrow or next week, Bonanno will send someone else. And I will be right back where I started, except now everyone will know that I can be pushed around. I cannot let that happen, so I am going to do something that ensures it never happens. I am going to make an example so permanent that nobody will ever test me again." He walked closer, close enough that Scalaz had to tilt his head back to look up at him. "We are going to take your fingers, Frank. All 10 of them. And I am going to explain to you what each finger represents so that when you look at your hands for the rest of your life, you will remember exactly what you did to earn this punishment. Illinois stood by the table, surgical gloves already on, the blade catching the harsh light. Raymond positioned himself behind the chair, ready to hold Scalise's hands steady. Marcus stood near the door, his face pale but his stance firm. The first finger represents the fact that you came into my territory without permission. Harlem is mine. I built it. I defended it. I earned it. You walked into my club like you owned it. That was your first mistake. The second finger represents the disrespect you showed by sitting at my table without being invited. In our world, small gestures matter. You sat down like you were my equal. You were not. The third finger represents the insult of your offer. 50%. You did not offer partnership. You demanded tribute. You treated me like a vassal. The fourth finger represents the threat you made. You told me that accidents happen, that buildings burn. You tried to make me afraid. The fifth finger represents your assumption that because you are white and I am black, that you could push me around. That assumption was wrong. Scalise was crying openly now, his whole body shaking. I understand. I understand. You made your point. Please. Please do not do this. I will never come back to Harlem. Just please let me keep my hands. The sixth finger represents every other man Joseph Bonanno has sent into territories that did not belong to him. Every other operator he has muscled. You are paying for all of them. The seventh finger represents the choice I am making right now. The choice to draw a line and defend it no matter what it costs. This is me deciding who I am going to be. The eighth finger represents the message I am sending to the commission. I respect the rules, but I will not be pushed around. I will not pay tribute to men who did nothing to help me build what I built. The ninth finger represents the future. Every time someone thinks about moving into Harlem, they will remember you. They will remember what happened to the last man who tried. And the 10th finger, Bumpy said, his voice dropping even lower, represents the fact that I am letting you live. I could kill you, Frank. It would be easier. But I am going to let you walk out of here alive so that you can spend the rest of your life as a reminder of what happens when you disrespect Bumpy Johnson. He turned to Illinois and nodded once. Do it. Start with the left hand. Little finger first. Keep each cut clean. Use the clamps to control the flow. We do not want him going into shock before we finish. Illinois stepped forward. Raymond moved to hold Scalise's left hand flat against the arm of the chair, spreading the fingers so that each one was isolated, exposed, vulnerable. Scalise started screaming again, pulling against the restraints with such force that the chair rocked on its legs. But Raymond's grip was iron, and nothing he did made any difference. The blade came down on the little finger first. One clean motion, angled to cut through the joint rather than the bone, the way a butcher might separate a chicken wing at the socket. The sound was wet and final, a soft crunch followed by a gasp from Scalise that turned into a howl. Illinois used the clamp immediately, pinching off the vessels, his movements efficient and practiced like a surgeon in an operating theater. Raymond held the hand steady. The next finger, then the next. Each cut precise. Each clamp applied with care. This was not about torture. This was about sending a message and making sure the messenger survived to deliver it. Illinois worked methodically, almost gently, his face showing nothing but concentration as he moved from finger to finger like a craftsman completing a necessary job. By the time he reached the thumb, Scalise had stopped screaming. He was making sounds, low animal noises that came from somewhere deep in his chest, but the screaming had stopped. His eyes had rolled back. His whole body was shaking. Illinois set the blade down and reached for the bandages, wrapping what remained of Scalise's left hand in layers of clean white cloth. Then he moved to the right hand. Raymond shifted position. The whole process started again. You need to understand something about pain. There is the pain that comes from a single injury, sudden and sharp. And then there is the pain that comes from repeated injury, from knowing that what just happened is going to happen again and again, and there is nothing you can do to stop it. That second kind of pain breaks something in the mind that cannot be repaired. Frank Scales learned that lesson over 90 minutes in a warehouse in Queens. He learned it finger by finger. He learned it in a way that would stay with him every single day for the rest of his life. And when Illinois finally stepped back and set down the blade for the last time, Scalise was no longer the man who had walked into Small's paradise 3 days earlier with a briefcase and a smile. He was something else now, something broken, something that would serve as a warning. Bumpy looked at the 10 fingers lined up on the table, each one pale and still, each one representing a choice that could not be unchoosed. Illinois found a small wooden box, lined it with ice, and carefully placed each finger inside, arranging them in 2 neat rows. He typed a note on a piece of paper using a small portable typewriter. 4 words. Your offer is declined. He folded the note, placed it on top of the fingers, and closed the lid. Take Scales to a hospital, Bumpy said. Drop him 2 blocks away. Make sure he can walk. Make sure someone will find him. We are not trying to kill him. We are trying to teach a lesson. They untied Scales from the chair. He could barely stand. His eyes were unfocused, his skin gray, his breathing shallow. But he was alive. That was the point. He was alive, and he would stay alive, and every day for the rest of his life. When he tried to button a shirt or hold a fork or shake someone's hand, he would remember this night. The most effective punishment is not the one that ends a life. It is the one that makes a life into a lesson. It is the one that turns a man into a message. And as they drove through the dark streets of Queens with Frank Scales bleeding in the back seat and a box of fingers sitting on the passenger seat wrapped in ice, Bumpy Johnson understood that he had just rewritten the rules of power in New York City. Some territories cannot be bought, some men cannot be pushed, and some messages are written in flesh and bone and pain that lasts forever. The box arrived at Joseph Bonanno's social club 3 days after Frank Scales disappeared. When Banano lifted the lid and read the 4 typed words, his face went completely still in the way that faces go still when a man realizes he has made a catastrophic miscalculation. He called a meeting of the commission that same afternoon. The 5 family heads gathered in a private room. Bonanno put the box on the table. He did not open it. Everyone already knew what it contained. This is what Bumpy Johnson sent me, Bonanno said, his voice tight. This is what he did to my captain, to a man under my protection. Carlo Gambino, who ran the most powerful family in New York, leaned back and lit a cigar. What did you expect, Joseph? You sent a man into Harlem to demand 50% of everything Bumpy Johnson built. You insulted him, and now you are surprised that he responded. He mutilated a man. That cannot stand. The rules are also clear about respect, Gambino said. About not starting wars you cannot finish. You broke those rules first. Bumpy Johnson just reminded you that they exist. So we do nothing. We accept the lesson, Gambino said. Harlem belongs to Bumpy Johnson. He has just proven that he will defend it. If you want to start a war over this, you will do it alone. One by one, the other bosses shook their heads. They had seen the box. They understood the message. Going to war with a man like that would cost more than anyone was willing to pay. Banano left that meeting, knowing he had lost. Frank Scales was found 3 days later in a Brooklyn hospital, bandaged and broken. The doctors said he would live, but his hands were gone. His career was finished. He would spend the next 26 years learning to eat and dress and function without the 10 fingers that had been taken from him. Bumpy Johnson never paid tribute to anyone. The other families canceled their plans to move into Harlem. The word spread through the 5 boroughs. Harlem was untouchable. The man who ran it had proven that some territories cannot be bought, some men cannot be pushed, and some messages rewrite the rules for everyone. You need to understand what really happened. It was not about revenge. It was about drawing a boundary so visible, so permanent, so undeniable that nobody would ever test it again. Bumpy Johnson could have killed Frank Scales. It would have been easier. But killing him would have started a war. Leaving him alive but ruined ended the war before it could begin. That is the difference between violence and power. Violence is what you do when you have no other options. Power is what you have when you make people understand that testing you is not worth the cost. 26 years later, Frank Scales died in his sleep at 68. The obituary mentioned his service, his loyalty, his devotion. It did not mention the 10 fingers or the knight in Queens or the message he became. But everyone who mattered knew. True power does not come from how many people you are willing to eliminate. It comes from how far you are willing to go to defend what is yours. Bumpy Johnson went exactly far enough. And because he did, Harlem stayed free, stayed independent, stayed his. Not because he was the most violent man in New York, but because he was the one man who understood that some boundaries, once drawn, must be defended no matter what the cost. That is what happened when one man looked at the most powerful crime families in America and said no, and made it stick. This story is shared for historical insight and personal reflection, not to promote violence or illegal behavior. Thank you for watching until the end. These stories take weeks of research and writing to create. If this resonated with you, if you see the lesson Bumpy Johnson was teaching about accountabilities and education over violence, hit that subscribe button. Help us reach 1 million subscribers so we can keep telling stories that matter. Stories about power used wisely. Stories about consequences faced honestly. Stories about men who chose to change systems instead of just destroying enemies. The next video drops soon. Until then, remember, real power is not what you can destroy. It is what you choose to build.